Hey guys, Prowl 1701 here. Today we're going to talk about Doctor Who animations, and we're going to talk about what I think the next upcoming animation might be. Now, we know the next one is supposed to be from BBC Studios, a 2D animation. The same team, basically, that did Underwater Menace. They did announce, I think it was back when they did the BFI screening, maybe, or it's something for Underwater Menace, back before Underwater Menace even released, that there were more on the way, because they planned these based on the sales of the previous one, and apparently the pre-order sales for Underwater Menace were so strong they went ahead and commissioned the next one, which is another way of saying pre-orders are very important. So if you're interested in these, always make sure you try to pre-order. Pre-orders are super important for this kind of thing. Same thing with the collection box sets, the Blake 7 box sets. Pre-orders are very important. I always try to make sure I pre-order. So we do know they plan on doing another one. Now, I don't know when it's coming. I think they tend to spend 12 to 18 months on these. And Underwater Menace came out, I believe, in November of 23. What, November 13th, I think. I was double checking the date. I think I got that right. So that's a little over a year ago. Now, they would have finished work on it probably a little before that. I'd say somewhere in January or September is probably when they finished work on it. I'm just guessing, but I'm betting somewhere around there. If they have 18 months to work on the next one, I know they spent 18 months working on Evil, despite Evil being 7 parts. You can't always go by the length of a story. Sometimes even shorter stories require more assets to make just because there's a lot going on in them. One of the reasons why some of the 4-part stories can't be done in 2D animation, like The Crusade, there's just so many assets, so many costume changes, so many people, etc., so many locations. But I think they spent 18 months on Evil, and I like that. I think if you give them less time, you get a rushed product like the original version of Power of the Daleks, which was fine, but the special edition is much superior. And then you get a product like Fury from the Deep, which is highly disappointing for a number of reasons. Some of the creative choices, but also the fact that it just feels like a rushed product. So I like giving the animators room to breathe. I don't mind waiting longer if it means I get a better product. And Evil of the Daleks came out very well with them having 18 months to work on it. If they spend 18 months working on this one, then they would be finishing up. If they finished Underwater Menace in July and jumped right into the next one, then they'd be finishing up around January of 25. If they say they finished up in September of 23, then they would be finishing up around March of 25, with hopefully announcements coming around then, is what I think for the next set. But we're going to go through here, and I'm going to talk about of the 11 stories, because if we count Mission to the Unknown, we have 11 stories that haven't been animated of the 26. Of the 26 stories that have missing episodes to one degree or another, 15 of them have been completed with animation, with us most recently getting Underwater Menace and the Celestial Toymaker. 11 are left, counting Mission to the Unknown. That one's a little kind of a gray area because we do have that college remake of it. So personally, I think the college remake is fine, but I think if they ever do animate Dalek's Master Plan, big if, they would want to animate Mission to the Unknown as kind of a prequel story, so they go together. So you have that kind of consistent look of them, much like how they animate even stories that are only partly missing. They completely animate them now, so you have a consistent viewing experience if you want it. Like with Underwater Menace, where 2 of the 4 episodes existed and they still animated the whole thing in case you wanted a consistent viewing experience. I think they would do that with Mission to the Unknown and just sell it as one 13-episode set, you know, Dalek's Master Plan with Mission to the Unknown or something like that, and just do 13 episodes. So we have all 6 seasons of classic Doctor Who are still affected by missing episodes that haven't had animations, all of them. We have 1 story from season 1, 1 story from season 2, 5 stories from season 3, which is half of season 3. Season 3 has 10 stories. 3 of them are complete. 2 more of them are complete with animation, Galaxy 4 Celestial Toymaker, and then 5 are still missing if you don't want to count the college remake of Mission to the Unknown. You have 2 stories for season 4, 1 story for season 5, 1 story for season 6. So I'm going to talk about, I'm going to rank these. We're going to cross them off as we go through them. So we're going to start with the ones that there's no way. There's just no way. I think it's highly unlikely we get these anytime soon. Maybe eventually when technology gets better to do these at a cheaper price, but right now, no way. They go in the NFW file, the no flipping way file, let's call it. Let's keep it PG here. Yes, the no flipping way file, the NFW file. And we're going to work our way up to where the last couple left are going to be the ones where I'm like, yeah, I think it could be these. So right off the bat, I don't think we're getting the Crusade. That would be the least likely. One, the Crusade is very difficult to do. So many people, so many costume changes. There's a lot going on in the Crusade. And the fact that we've already got the box set out for it. I think they're going to focus on animations that they can incorporate into the box sets. That makes sense to me. Like, you hold off on releasing seasons 3 and 4 and maybe some of the others until maybe you can get those animated. The animations have time to work with their standalone releases. Then you put the box set out with as much of the animations as you can. We've already got the box set for season 2. That seems the least likely, because if they did an animation for the Crusade, you're going to have a lot of people mad that, well, they should have just waited and done the season 2 box set after the animation. Or, you know, they're going to be mad that they already got the box set and they're not going to have the animation in it. It just seems like the BBC would be shooting themselves in the foot. Again, plus the fact it's just difficult to do that animation in the 2D style. And we know the next release we're supposed to get is probably going to be a BBC Studios 2D animation. So, and I think Crusade would be a 3D animation. So that one goes off the list. Next on the list is Dalek's Master Plan and Mission to the Unknown, because I think, again, they would just combine those together. Dalek's Master Plan, we all want it. Everybody wants Dalek's Master Plan, but that's 12 episodes. And you know, just like I know, they're going to animate the whole thing. I know 3 of the episodes exist, episodes 2, 5, and 10. But, again, they go for consistent viewing experience, and they like giving people options. So they will animate the whole thing. So we're talking 12 episodes of DMP plus Mission to the Unknown. That's 13 episodes with a lot of characters and a lot of changes of location. Dalek's Master Plan is a lot like The Chase in the sense that every episode it seems like they're going somewhere else, they're going somewhere else, they're going somewhere else. Plus just all of the assets you'd have to do for Feast of Stephen. I don't even like Feast of Stephen. But, you know, that's kind of its own standalone thing you got to create assets for, just for that. I just feel like there's too much there for them to do in 2D animation. As much as they know people want it, I really feel like in the time it would take to do Dalek's Master Plan, you could do 2 or 3 other stories, and I'd rather have the 2 or 3 other stories instead of them spending 3 years on Dalek's Master Plan. So I don't think we're getting Dalek's Master Plan or Mission to the Unknown anytime soon. That's 2 more off the list. In the NFW file they go. Next one in the NFW file, Marco Polo. Marco Polo is another one that I just don't think they're going to do it. It's 7 parts. It's a 7-parter. It's such a big cast. Historicals, as we know, are not the most popular stories to begin with. They just historically, ironically enough, are not popular stories. Even though a lot of us would love to see Marco Polo, I would love to see an animated version of Marco Polo. The behind-the-scenes photos of Marco Polo makes it look like such a gorgeous story. Like, so much went into the outfits and everything. It looks like it was a gorgeous story. I enjoy the 30-minute cut down of it as well. I need to read the novelization one day. And I feel like there are other ways to make Marco Polo work on a season 1 box set. I talked about that recently when I was discussing the 60 seasons. You could do a reconstruction of Marco Polo, because there are lots of telesnaps for Marco Polo with the exception of episode 4, but there's enough telesnaps you can work around that. You could also do an audio novelization on the box set as well, so you could read or listen to the audio. You could actually have the audio pages on there and just turn the page. You know, you could actually have the novel put on the TV and you press a button to turn the page if you want to read it yourself. There are ways around that. I don't think you could do a 2D animation of it either with 7 parts and so many characters. I think it would have to be a 3D animation. I don't think the technology is there to pull off the 3D animation yet. I think that the animation they use for Celestial Toymaker works because of the fantasy nature and the surreal nature of Toymaker. I don't think it works for a more realistic story like Marco Polo. They need to fine-tune that 3D animation more. And since the next animation coming from BB Studios should be a 2D animation, don't think it's going to be Marco Polo, which is the reason why I argue they need to just go ahead and get that season 1 box set out. If they don't want to do a Troughton yet, they need to just go ahead and get season 1 out maybe late in 2025, early 2026. I would be fine with getting season 1 before a Trouton if that's how they had to do it, because I don't see Marco Polo getting animated anytime soon. I don't think the budget and the technology is just there yet to pull that off. So we have season 1 and season 2 out of the way. I also do not think we will get the Highlanders in 2D animation. Now, the Highlanders maybe in 3D animation. Like, if Shapeshifter Studios, I don't know how sales for Toymaker were. I hope they were good. I liked the Toymaker animation a lot, actually. Surprisingly more than I thought I would. The color and the black and white version of it's really good. If Shapeshifter Studios teams up and does another one with the BBC, I think Highlanders could be a good choice for that. I would love to see the Highlanders animated. I love the Highlanders so much. It's such a fun story. Again, being a historical is kind of against it, but it's really the only Trouton historical we have, pure historical. And it's the introduction of Jamie, which is a big deal. One of the most famous companions, my favorite male companion, and one of my favorite companions. I know it would be a little harder to animate. Again, there's a lot going on, and their little skirts are very hard to animate as well. That's one of the reasons it wouldn't work in 2D. They've said before that they back before they did the Macroterra, they were debating which one to do next, and they was basically between the Highlanders and the Macroterra, and they talked about the difficulties of animating the Highlanders, and that's why they went with the Macroterra. I think the Highlanders, if it gets done, is the 3D animation. I think that's a possibility if the 3D animations can get better, and I would love to have it. I think the Highlanders could be the one story from season 4 that doesn't get animated at all. And to be fair, the recon we have of the Highlanders is good. I actually really enjoyed the recon of it. We'd probably get a brand new recon, which may be even better. But the existing loose cannon recon was really good. The novelization of it is a really good read as well. We could get an audio version of that on the box set. I think if nothing gets animated from season 4, it's probably the Highlanders. If there's a story that doesn't get animated, it's the Highlanders probably. And I'd be all right with that, because despite its missing nature, despite only being able to read it or watch the recon, I very much love that story. It's a very fun story. So I don't think we're getting that one. Next on the list that I think is unlikely, and this is the last one that I really think is unlikely. I think after this one, you start getting into possibles. And the last one I find unlikely is the Massacre. I have just always heard the Massacre would be difficult to do. There's not a lot of existing telesnaps to work off of. The recon is a bit hard to get through. Not as hard as I thought it was going to be. I think I mentioned that when I reviewed it. I found the recon of the Massacre easier to get through than I anticipated. However, the televised version of the Massacre is nowhere near as good as the novelization. I love the novelization. The novelization, which was written by the same guy who wrote the original script, the novelization goes more off his early scripts before it had to be trimmed down, one for budget, one for time. I'm not actually sure how good the sound quality is on the Mythmakers right off the top of my head, but definitely the novelization was a lot better. Just you could tell it was from an earlier draft of the story back before they had cut things for budget, cut things for time, and the fact Hartnell was going to be on holiday for at least one episode of it. And the novelization's a much better read. And so while I think a lot of people would love to get the Massacre, especially for that wonderful speech from Hartnell in episode 4, which is a great speech. I have watched the recon of it. I just don't think we're going to get that one. I don't think that one's quite in the NFW file. I think it's a possibility. I just think it's an outside chance. I think it would be too difficult to animate with all the people involved. Also, I think these days that can be seen as a very political story. Also a very dark story. Lots of people get killed at the end. The way the world is now, I don't know if they would want to do an animation of that. I think, especially since there's a lot of religious views going on in it, I just think that one would be, I just don't think they would do that. There's too many other ones that are much safer to do that I think they'll do. So I think it's highly unlikely we get the Massacre. And I think from there, we start getting into the ones that we're likely to see. To varying degrees, But the ones that are left, I think, are possibilities. I'll put it that way. And we'll do these again in the order that I think they're going to be done. Starting with the Myth Makers, I think the Myth Makers is possible, but unlikely. Again, historical's not typically the most popular. Now, it does have the fact it's a companion departure story going for it, because this is the episode where Vicky leaves. I have seen the recon for this. I'm going to be honest, I'm not overly impressed with the recon of this. The novelization is better, if different, because it's told from the point of view of Homer. It still didn't necessarily blow me away, but it was definitely better. And the actual televised version suffers from a few things, like the incidental music is terrible. The incidental music for the Myth Makers is absolutely... yeah, it was pretty bad. I didn't care for that, as many of you know. The story itself was just okay. It didn't blow me away, to be honest. Myth Makers just isn't a story. That would be a big deal for me. I would buy it because I want to support the animations, and I'd like to see it animated, I guess, so maybe I would enjoy it more, but it's not one that would be high on my list, even though Season 3 definitely needs some holes plugged. So, possibility, but I think not one of the high possibilities, but it's definitely the lowest point of, okay, if they announce that, I wouldn't be too surprised. Next on the list is probably the Space Pirates. The Space Pirates being a futuristic story strikes me as a possibility. The biggest thing the Space Pirates has going against it, in my opinion, is its reputation. It's just not a popular story. The Space Pirates has often been held as Troughton's worst story, which certainly is not the case. That would be the Dominators. And just considered one of the worst Classic Who stories, period. Despite the fact it's written by Doctor Who's greatest writer, Robert Holmes. It very much is a 4-parter stretched into 6 parts. Let's be honest. We know that's exactly what it is. Its biggest problem is that it's a very visual story that's mostly missing. And the one episode we have, there's just not a lot going on, especially with our main TARDIS team. They're pretty much trapped in that room the whole time. I think if we had a different episode existing, like instead of episode 2, we had one of the later episodes where there's more going on, I think the story might have a little better reputation. And the fact that the recon is really hard to get through because of the lack of telesnaps, because John Cura was in very bad health at this point, and he had stopped doing telesnaps, I believe, partway through the Mine Robber. And I think John passed away not long after this story came out as well. So because of that, there's no telesnaps. So the recon is very hard to get through. The recon for this story gets progressively harder and harder and harder to get through. It's a really hard watch. The novelization is a great read, though. I love the novelization of the Space Pirates. It really shows you just how good of an actual story this is, because there is a lot of good story there. It's just a very visual story. I would be all for an animation of the Space Pirates. I really think you could take the Macroterra approach with it, where you don't try to stick with the original camera scripts and the original production, and you do your own thing with it. The Macroterra animation greatly benefits from the team taking creative liberties with it, and the story is much better as a result of that. I love the Macroterra quite a bit. So I think Space Pirates would also benefit from that. Using creative license to improve areas of the story, giving it a much sleeker animation, especially some of the spaceship effects. I really think you could make a very good end product if you animated it properly. I would like to see the Space Pirates. That's one that I would be excited about. It would also complete Season 6. Now, we know with the colorization of the War Games, Season 6 will probably be a while before it comes out, because they'll want to release... They're going to want to release the color version of the War Games as a standalone release and get money for that. The Steelbook, the Blu-ray, the DVD. They're going to want to get their money for that, which means they're going to want those standalone releases to have time to shine, make their money before they release the box set. So if you're already going to be holding back the Season 6 box set for that, go ahead and get the standalone release for the animation out for Space Pirates. That way you're also giving that standalone release for Space Pirates animation out to make its money, because you have to do that as a standalone release first. They have to make their money back for that. And so since you know you're not getting season 6 soon anyway because of the War Games colorization, go ahead and get the animation for the Space Pirates out. And so by the time you finally do get the War Games out and say the season 6 box set out in late 2026, maybe early 2027, probably 18 months or so after the animation for Space Pirates came out. I think it's about 18 months they wait. You could have both of those ready to go, and you could have season 6 completed. I would be all right with that. The next one on the list is The Wheel in Space, the only story we need to complete season 5. I am very surprised this one hasn't been done yet. It has so much going for it. It is a Cyberman story, the only incomplete Cyberman story at this point, with the others being completed by animation. It is a companion's first story. It is Zoe's first story. This is where she joins the Tardis team. It is a season finale, because of course it's the finale of season 5, and it's the last story we need to complete a season. There's a lot going on here for why they should do The Wheel in Space. The Wheel in Space does not strike me as hard to do. Limited settings, limited cast, the Cybermen designs, you could just do one Cyberman design for all of it. It does not strike me as a hard story to animate, despite being a 6-parter. I mean, the only thing going against it's kind of its reputation. It is considered the weakest of the 60s Cyberman stories. But there's so much else going for it. I'm very surprised this one hasn't been done yet. I don't know if there's some kind of legal issues with them doing this one for whatever reason. I'm very surprised we haven't gotten it. The rumor mill, though, about the next animation is that it's not one we expect, like Wheel in Space. That's the only reason this one's not higher, because you figured they would get this one. The only thing I can think of is they're scared that the animation won't look as good as that abridged version of episode 1 they did back that was on the Macroterra release, where they did that 10-minute cut down of episode 1 of Wheel in Space animated, which looked phenomenal, by the way. Phenomenal. I love that 10-minute cut down. And that they're worried the animation they do for it won't match that and people will complain. It's the only thing I can think of. Which I get it probably won't be as good. I get that. Sun and Moon Studios really needs to be brought back for these animations. I love the Macroterra. But the fact that rumor seems to suggest it's not one that's more common like that. It's not one we think it is. One of the lesser known ones instead is the only reason this one is not higher. Even though at this point after Wheel in Space, we only have 2 left. And that brings me to the top 2, the Savages and the Smugglers. I think it would probably be one of these. My big 3 would be Wheel in Space, Savage, and Smugglers. We did get that leak a couple years back from the Mira that the Smugglers would get animated. Smugglers and Underwater Menace. Underwater Menace turned out to be right. Now, a lot of people think that maybe they got it wrong on the Smugglers and it was actually those colorized clips that they were talking about, because we do know some of the existing clips from the Smugglers did get colorized, and maybe that's what they were talking about. I would love for the Smugglers to get animated for multiple reasons. One, I love Season 4. Season 4 is my favorite season of 60s Doctor Who, so that would be one step closer to completing Season 4, because I do want to get that Season 4 box set at some point, and that would bring me one step closer to that. 2, I just like the Smugglers. I've never watched the Recon. I'm waiting to see what the announcement for the next animation is going to be before I watch the Recon, because if it is the Smugglers, I'll wait for the animation. If it's not, then I'll watch the Recon. I have read the novelization. Loved the novelization. It was a great read. Very much enjoyed it. So that's why I'm holding off to see if the next animation is the Smugglers. I think there's a strong chance of it. BBC Studios has done a lot of Season 4. Planet 55 and BBC Studios combined have done most of what they've worked on has been Season 4, while Big Finish Creative has worked on Seasons 5 and 3. If you actually look it up and look at who did the animations, Big Finish Creative is the ones doing Seasons 3 and 5, where Big Finish Studios has done a lot of Season 4. Planet 55 and Big Finish Studios have done a lot of Season 4. So I expect them to stick with Season 4. I think the Smugglers is a very strong choice. Or the Savages, because everybody, I've never seen the Savages. It's the one classic Doctor Who story that I really have no idea about, because there's only like 3 classic Who stories I haven't seen at this point. And the Savages is the one that I'm kind of going in blind on. Other than knowing Stephen leaves in that story, I'm going in blind on it, which I like. But everyone tells me that one would be easy to animate. I remember back when Galaxy 4 first got announced, I kept hearing that the next Hartnell we got would probably be the Savages. Good chance it would be the Savages, because it sounds like it would be easy to animate. I don't know what the audio quality is on it, but it sounds like it would be easy to animate. So going off of what I've heard there, and the fact they probably do want to get more Season 3 stories knocked out, I could see the Savages. So my top 2 I think we're going to get that are more likely, especially considering Smugglers and Savages are both 4-parters. I think it will be the Smugglers or the Savages. My outside choices would be the Wheel in Space, the Space Pirates, and the Myth Makers. That's what I think we're going to get. So if I was a betting man, my main 3 choices would be Smugglers, Savages, Wheel in Space. If I was betting the kind of outside shot but still possible, I'd say Space Pirates or Myth Makers. That's pretty much my thoughts on the animations, from the no flipping way all the way up to I could see them doing this one. I pretty much narrowed down exactly why I feel the way I do. So I would love to get a lot of these. Again, some of them, Dallas Master Plan, no. Marco Polo, no. Crusade, no. I think there's no way you get those. Same thing with Mission to the Unknown. No way. You don't get those. I firmly believe, though, Myth Makers is an outside shot. I'd be a little disappointed, to be honest, but I'd still happily get it. But I would be really happy to get the Savages, as it would give me a chance to see that for the first time. I'd love to get the Smugglers, because it's another Season 4 story. I like the Smugglers. I don't think it's going to be the Highlanders, just because I think the Highlanders would be a 3D production, even though I could see it being a 3D production. I would love to get the Wheel in Space. I enjoyed the Wheel in Space more than most. I don't think it's mind-blowing, but I really think the 2 surviving episodes for it were really good, and the recon just a little hard to get through. And then I would love to get an animated version of Space Pirates. I would absolutely love to get an animated version of Space Pirates, especially if they took their own creative liberties with it like they did with Macroterra. So I want to know, what do you think of my theorizing? If you think I'm kind of on the right track here, if you have totally different views on it, comment down below. Let's talk about it. Don't forget to click the like button and the subscribe button as well. That certainly helps me out, and it's very much appreciated. I also have a P.O. box if you would like to send anything for me to look at and review. A link to my Amazon wishlist is down there. A link to my Amazon UK wishlist is also down in the description. A link to my Patreon is down there as well. That does help me keep the bills paid. I am trying to save up for a house, and that is where pretty much all the money from my Patreon does go in the savings account toward a house. So that's very much appreciated. Check that out. There's a link to that down there. I want to give a shout out to a couple of my top tier patrons, Colin Coney and Sam Venning. I appreciate their support, as I do the support of all of my patrons and my YouTube members. It's very much appreciated. Most importantly, thank you for watching.